Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and while you're at it, click the bell to be notified of future videos. Today's block is called Shadow Star, finishes at 12 inches. Here's the diagram. The corner units are made up of half square triangles and small squares, and the side units are 2 flying geese. And then the center square is just a plain square. Here are 4 set block to block. This is a 3x3 grid, so we have 3 units across and 3 units down. And because it's a 12-inch finished block, the units in each grid all finish at 4 inches. Here are the cutting diagrams, including the AccuQuilt dies for each patch. And these are the cutting instructions listed by fabric. And in the cutting instructions, you have different choices for making your half square triangles. You can either cut patches, or you can cut squares and make half square triangles 2 at a time. So there's your choice there. And we're also going to make the flying geese 4 at a time, but you also have a choice if you just want to cut patches and sew them that way. Now let's look at the fabrics. These sets here are for the flying geese 4 at a time. This is one set of 4, and this is another set of 4. We have cut the large squares the exact size we need, and we've cut the small squares larger than we need so we can trim down on both of those. These are the squares that we've cut a little bit larger for half square triangles 2 at a time. And once we stitch the half square triangles, we'll use the small squares here to make the corner units. And the flying geese make the side units. And then here is the center square. Let's start by making the half square triangles first. If you're not familiar with this method, we place the fabrics right sides together, and on the back of the light fabric, we're going to draw a diagonal line, and we're going to stitch 1/4 inch on both sides of this diagonal line, and do that for all 4 sets. When the stitching is done, you're going to cut on the diagonal line. And then here you have your half square triangle. Press your seams, and then we'll trim it to 2.5 inches. I use my 6.5 inch ruler, and it has a diagonal line. I line the diagonal with the seam line, and then I check all 4 sides of the fabric. So I'll have enough to cut here and enough to trim here, and then here's my 2.5 inch mark, and there's enough to trim there and enough to trim here. So I'll start by trimming these. Flip this around. Just line the 2.5 inch mark on the side and the bottom, and then line up your diagonal line and trim. And do that for all 8 half square triangles. Now we're going to take 2 of the half square triangles that we just made, and 1 each of these 2.5 inch squares, and look at the diagram, and we're going to piece the 4 corner units. And these are done like this. So you'll make 4 like this. Just piece these 2 together and these 2, press the seams, and then sew the 2 rows together. Now we'll move on to the flying geese, and we have 2 sets to do. I'm just going to demo 1 set because they're both done the same way. You have your large square, which is the geese part of the flying geese, and your 4 small squares, which are the sky part. On the back of each of the small squares, we've drawn a diagonal line. We place 2 of the small squares on the large square like this. You are matching these corners here and here, and then make sure this line is straight and even. Then you'll take this to your machine, and you're going to sew a true 1/4 inch seam allowance on both sides of this diagonal line. Once you've stitched on both sides of the line, you're going to cut on the line. And you'll have 2 pieces like this. Open them up and press the seams, either to one side or open. Now you'll take both of these and your 2 remaining squares and place it on each piece like this. Then for both of these, you'll stitch a true 1/4 inch on each side of the diagonal line. When you stitch this, you'll see the stitching either stops or starts, depending on which way you're going, at this V section right here. And that will give you a nice straight line once it's opened up like this. So make sure that you're as close as you can inside that little angle there. Now we'll cut this in half. And we have 2 pieces like this. So you'll do the other one the same way. Now we'll press this and then we'll trim it. Since we cut this geese portion, the large square, the exact size we need, and we stitch at a 1/4 inch, this measurement, the width of this, should be 4.5 inches. And that's the size we need. So let's see. And it's just right on at 4.5 inches. And then down here, these little points should end right in the corner. It's hard to see with these nubs here, but they end right in the corner. And that's perfect. That's what we want. So down here, we only have to trim off these 4 nubs. Now let's trim off the top. We need 2.5 inches this way. So we'll put our 4.5 inch down there and our 2.5 inch on this line. And then check up here. Your 1/4 inch mark is above that point. I'm going to move it up just a little bit. So it's above the point. That means our points won't be cut off. And then we trim. And then cut off these nubs. And do that too. Both sets of your flying geese, and you should have a total of 8 flying geese for this block. Now we're on step 3, and we take 1 each of these flying geese units and we put them like this. So the dark colors make a sort of chevron, and stitch these 2 together and make 4 of these. And these are the side units. When you piece this, you want to put the light colored flying geese on top so you can see the point. So as you're stitching, you can make sure your stitching does not stitch over that point, because you want it to look nice and pretty when it's pressed. So now press all these, and then we'll put the block together. When I stitched these flying geese together, I found it easier to press towards this dark goose unit, because it makes a pretty big lump here when you're trying to open it up. So if you want to try that, I found it worked better for me this way. Now we have all our units done, so let's put our block together. Now here's our block. We sew the top units together, the middle and the bottom, press the seams, and then sew the rows together. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and while you're at it, click the bell to be notified of future videos.